This show almost killed the Super Sentai series. Or at least we thought it did. Chikyu Sentai Fiveman aired in 1990 and was written by Hirohisa Soda, a name that might not immediately stand out to you, but he was the main writer for the majority of the 80s Sentai era, the mastermind behind classic shows as Flashman, Liveman, and even Bioman. Fiveman is a very important show for Soda, as it was the last series he worked on as the main writer. It's also considered to be the show that made it clear he'd ran out of ideas. For many years, Fiveman was considered to be one of the worst performing Sentai, having the least viewed episode up to that point, which to this day is still the third lowest rated episode in the entire franchise history, only being beaten out by Ryu Soldier episode 22 and the infamous Car Ranger episode 25. This show almost ended Sentai's 13-year run, until Chojin Sentai Jetman aired, saving the franchise. Which is what we thought. Until April of 2025, when Twitter user @2010NicoNico posted a thread showing that the ratings for the second half of Fiveman not only matches the ratings of Jetman, but even surpasses it at its peak, flipping the entire narrative surrounding this show on its head. Now, Fiveman is not only the show that almost killed the Super Sentai series, but it's also the show that saved it from this downward trend. How does any television show go from almost ruining a decade-long legacy to becoming one of the best performing shows in its time? What is it about the first half of Fiveman that made people not want to watch? And how was Hirohisa Soda able to turn it around and save his legacy? Today, we're watching Chikyu Sentai Fiveman. The show begins with its opening song, and it's a bit of an earworm. That part where they start counting in English is especially problematic.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5
Probably because it's the only part I could actually sing out loud without accidentally summoning a demon. The main thing I want to draw attention to in the opening is this boat-looking thing. Throughout the entire series, I was really excited to see our Rangers go on some nautical adventures, just to find out that it doesn't exist. And they don't step into a single boat this entire show. And when I searched to see if there was a toy of this thing, all I found was this as seen on TV ass ceiling fan. So I truly have no clue why this shot exists besides to taunt me. The show begins on the planet Shidon, where the Hoshikawa family is helping two aliens reform the planet that was previously in ruin from a foreign invasion. But there's hope as we see white flowers begin to blossom, meaning that there is potential to bear life and revitalize this once thought to be forgotten planet. The family's robot companion, Arthur, arrives to take a picture, documenting this momentous occasion. He's kind of like Colin or Wagon, except less sexy, or maybe his refrigerator build scratches an itch for you. A giant male appendage shaped vessel descends from the sky, and while this might sound like great news for my single mothers in the audience, it ruins the garden, destroying the flowers as well as the last two Shidonians, wiping out the entire race. A group of aliens exit the rocket ship they call the Volgyre and proclaim to have destroyed this planet in the name of Galactic Empress Meadow. The group's leader, Captain Garoa, raises his sword, threatening to strike the two scientists, when suddenly he is grazed by a laser bullet shot by the family's oldest son, Gaku. With his face now scarred, Garoa attempts to go after the child, but the group is stunned by Arthur, allowing them a moment to get away on foot, but not for long, as they're hunted down by another inappropriate-looking spaceship that turns into a monster. The scientists attempt to protect their children from the oncoming attack, barricading themselves in their lab behind an iron door. That does little to separate our heroes from the oncoming threat, prompting the parents to entrust their children with Arthur, demanding that he take the kids back to Earth as they hold off the monsters. The robot and kids apprehensively make their way to the magma base, with Arthur and Gaku holding their two youngest twins. Gaku stares out the window as they lift off, witnessing an explosion in their parents' hideaway. Later that day, all of the children have gone to bed, except for Gaku, who is unable to sleep. He hugs Arthur for comfort, accidentally hitting a button that prints the picture taken earlier from the robot's chest. Arthur admires it and promises to raise the children into fine adults. It's now 20 years later in the spring of 1990. Arthur is waking up the kids for their first day of school, but not because they're teenagers with attitude. The 5 siblings have grown up to be elementary school teachers, each specializing in a different subject. Kazumi, the oldest daughter, teaches math and acts as a maternal figure for her siblings, while Ken is the second oldest son and has a bit of a brash personality that typically causes him to run into situations without thinking, acting on emotions. This is reflected in the fact that he is a gym teacher, prioritizing physicality over studiism. The youngest twins, Remi and Fumiya, went into the arts, most likely because they spent the least amount of time with their parents as kids, who were scientists, so they didn't develop the same appreciation for the STEM field as their siblings, but still wanted to be teachers like them. Remi teaching music and is an incredibly skilled martial artist, and Fumiya teaches language arts and is the most childlike of the group. And the oldest son, Gaku, is a science teacher, which in contrast to Remi and Fumiya, may be a result of him spending the most time with their parents, admiring their passion for the subject, and wanting to teach kids similar to how they taught him. He's conducting his class outside today, working on the school garden, admiring the white flower that has begun to blossom. One of the girls asks why he likes it so much, and he states that it brings back memories, when suddenly, he's confronted with those memories. He looks up in fear to find the Volgeir once again descending from the sky. We're now formally introduced to Meadow, who is presented to us as a disembodied floating head, which reminds me of the baby sun from Teletubbies if it was like serving face. The Zone army now claims to have destroyed 999 planets. Angel numbers, and are setting their sights on Earth to be their 1000th planet. If successful, Meadow will be granted immortality. They launch an all-out assault attacking the school and the surrounding city. Gaku witnesses as the children cling on to him, triggering his memories from 20 years ago. They're able to usher the children to safety, but unfortunately, the school is destroyed. Zone is celebrating an early victory, believing they were easily able to destroy this planet, when suddenly, just beyond the horizon, they're confronted by a series of vehicles able to put a stop to their forces. Exiting from them is a group of color-coded warriors charging towards Zone at an incredible pace, proclaiming themselves to be Earth Sentai Fiveman, a name that could honestly be used to describe almost any Sentai team, to be honest. It's definitely better than the originally proposed title for the series, Brother Man, which sounds like an old white dude trying to appeal to his son's hip friends. Brother Man. Sounds weird. I would also say the name is in poor taste considering the fact that there's 2 women on the team, but what bothers me more is the team with the massive 5 on their chest is in fact not the Fiveman. Another alternative name proposed for the series was Vector Man, which I actually quite like. I think I take more issue with them being the Earth Sentai, because like, aren't all Sentai teams meant to defend Earth? Unless it's like King Oger or something, where like literally every Sentai team can be considered Earth's Sentai. I would have preferred if they called themselves the Sibling Sentai, or the Brother Sentai, or hell, even the Education Sentai. At least that feels more descriptive of what this team represents. Their suits are really nice though. I personally like them a lot. They feel quite modern for this era of the show, and a bit more detailed than what we would get later in the 90s compared to shows like Gingaman or Go-Go 5 in terms of the chest design. I like how the helmets designate each of the siblings' subject of interest, though I do want to mention how I believe this is the only instance of helmets having ears, unless you want to count the headphones on Bioman. We've talked about teams having lips, but this is the only time I think I've ever noticed what I think are meant to be designated ear holes on helmets. The girls even have earrings, a detail I regretfully did not mention in the Live Man video. I kind of wish Sentai would bring that back because it's kind of cool. Give me more earrings. In episode 2, Five Red greets Captain Garawa, saying it's been some time since they've last encountered one another. Billion, the drunk from Zone, is surprised to hear that someone from Earth recognizes them, and Five Red imitates a gun pointed at Garawa's face with his hands, which is ice cold. Gaku is so raw. Garawa asks for an explanation, and Gaku takes full responsibility for the scar on his face. Gaku is a menace! Gaku is a menace! I need you to remember this. Gaku is a menace. Garawa is shocked to have finally come face to face with a child who shot him 20 years ago. Fumiya and Remi explain how while they may have never known their parents' face or their warmth, the 5 of them grew up supporting one another, waiting for this exact day, to get vengeance for their fallen parents. Gaku then tells Garawa that it won't just be his face this time. tough! And the five-man are able to get Zone to retreat, where the villains discuss their first loss. And for a moment, I'd like to take a second to pause and introduce you to each of Zone's members. You're already familiar with Captain Garawa and Empress Meadow, but Zone also consists of Galactic Swordsman Billion, who is an alcoholic, sake being his drink of choice, as well as Galactic Scientist Doldora and Galactic Fang Zaza. I don't know what makes her a Fang, but sure. As well as this goddamn abomination, Galactic Merchant Dongaros, who seems to be the team's accountant. The five-man are investigating the rubble of the destroyed elementary school and state that the students will be forced to split up and attend the nearest schools in their area. Kazumi assures the class that this is just for the time being until the school is rebuilt. And out of the corner of Gaku's eye, he notices the white flower still intact. Zone flies overhead once more when they get a call from Arthur, awareing the five-man of their coordinates. The siblings meet up with him to find that Zone has taken over the Space Observation Center as their base. Ken, enraged by this matter, sprints at full speed towards the observatory when he's interrupted by a force field. Gaku and Arthur warn the siblings that it's best not to be reckless, but Ken is sick of their lectures and convinces his other siblings to sneak in with him. Arthur is especially disappointed by this, as he did his best to raise them like his own. And now Ken has just thrown in his face that as humans, they feel real emotions, unlike him. But Arthur seems to be incredibly torn up by this, indicating that he is able to process real emotions. ChatGPT isn't, and ChatGPT isn't your boyfriend. Ken and his siblings are formulating a plan to enter the base when they're held at gunpoint by one of Zone's members. Remi is objectively the most skilled fighter on this team, and this is just like the first example of many. Fumiya decides to disguise himself using the helmet left by the gunmen and attempts to bring in Remi and Kazumi, claiming they're a present for Garawa. And while I should mention how most high schools offer Spanish or French class, Fumiya is fluent in intergalactic alien. They explain that it's because he's a literature teacher, but I'm not buying it. I was a literary major for a year, and all I ever did was read Looking for Godot and try not to kill myself. Ken uses his siblings' diversion to enter unnoticed, until the other Zone higher-ups discover this and claim that Garawa is asexual. My man. So the Beezies are officially up for grabs, prompting them to, get felt up by a group of foot soldiers. Early Sentai is just different, man. That's gross. They also discover that Fumiya is wearing a disguise when Remi requests he help the two of them, leading to him being held at knife point and Ken also being discovered by Zone. The team is officially backed into a corner with no way out, until Gaku arrives with a fucking machine gun. Not like a Power Rangers toy gun, but like a literal weapon of war that he uses to mow down every threat against his little siblings. He's peak. Gaku's raw. Arthur is there too and is not afraid to throw down with the monster of the week. The five then transform, and I should note that the boys have a different changer than the girls. The boys are able to remove this hunk of plastic from their wrist and hold it to the sky, while the girls have this differently shaped hunk of yellow plastic. I'm not sure why the changers are gender specific. I don't feel like I've ever heard of another Sentai team doing something like this. But I definitely could be wrong. Anyways, the five are able to defeat the monster of the week when Zone summons Gorlin 1, this Michelin-tired looking giant that actually seems quite cuddly. Gorlins are able to absorb the energy of monsters and merge with them, creating a giant version. You may have noticed that this is episode 2 and how we're currently calling for Gorlin 1. This bothers me more than it should. It's never corrected and the Golden numbers never match up with the episode. In fact, it only gets worse as they summon Golden 35 in episode 43. Anyways, the five-man summon their power machines from the magma base and combine them to form 5 Robo. It's an alright mecha. It kind of looks like any other Sentai mech, to be honest. I do like how each limb displays one of the Rangers' respective symbols, but past that, I don't think I could pick this out in a lineup. It has this final attack where it removes the tip of its sword to use as a knife, and I hate it every time I see them do it, because the show presents this as if it's like this really cool thing, but ultimately what you end up with is this robot holding this dinky ass toothpick in one hand and this hollow looking incomplete husk of a sword in the other. I really am willing to go on record and say this is the worst finishing move of any mecha in Sentai history. As always, I'd like to take a moment to tell you guys to go watch the show in case you haven't seen it. Lucky for us, this is one of the few Sentai to actually be released on DVD with English subtitles by Shout Factory, which as of recording this video, you can easily find on Amazon for less than 40 bucks. Some of you may be missing the tube TV in the back right now. I just want to let you know that I actually did try buying a VHS of Fiveman on Bai. It was like 10 bucks and then I waited 2 weeks for it. And it never got to my warehouse, and then they told me to fuck off. I did end up getting my 10 bucks back, but then I got laid off from my job, so I really need that 10 bucks right now. That being said, feel free to subscribe to the Patreon, where you will find weekly reactions to Superhero Time and monthly life updates that I like to call Christian's Monthly Catch-Up, where sometimes I get too personal. All that and more for only $5 a month. I really don't like e-begging, so I should let you know that I am looking for a job and I technically am still employed until February, so don't worry about like my safety or anything like that. I'm just in a weird situation right now, so you know, any little bit helps and I really appreciate it, but I should be okay. Anyways, on to episode 3. Gaku is visiting the remains of the elementary school where he runs into one of his students, unable to move on from his favorite teacher, who of course is Gaku, which is his downfall, because of course Billion decides to create a monster that can take over people's bodies, and he plans to make it possess a child because he knows the Fiveman wouldn't harm it because they're teachers, and probably also because they're just decent human beings. This is actually evil. I know there's space aliens and stuff, but I'm almost certain this breaks the Geneva Convention. Actually, that line was probably crossed when they started bombing residential areas, but I just really thought the kids would have been off the table. Anyways, the kid refuses to listen to Gaku when he tells him to go home because, and I quote, "You aren't my teacher now, so you can't tell me what to do." Then why are you so torn up over this man that means nothing to you? Of course, the monster takes over his body and the Fiveman can't really do anything about it. Billion offers to give up the kid if Gaku accepts an invitation to show up to the quarry. Of course it's a quarry, unmorphed. The other Rangers recognize that this is obviously a setup to have the monster take over Gaku's body, but then Gaku says the hardest line in the entire show: risking your life can open the path to survival. Now think of this in the context of him being a child and preparing to face Zone ever since his parents were taken away from him. It's just more proof that Gaku is like a top tier red. So then the monster takes over Gaku's body, but gets his feelings hurt once Billion orders him to kill himself, which I think any of us would take issue with. This prompts the monster to set Gaku free, and then he's immediately offed anyways. The next episode opens on Zone having a party with what I can only describe as a fly honey wearing a goat head in lingerie, when Doldora finds a monster that can turn water into sake, like a Japanese Jesus, if he were an elephant. Arthur is helping Remi train her martial arts in the woods, showing off just how talented of a fighter she is. I'm pretty sure the actress is doing a lot of her own stunts here, and I just have to give her props, because also in this episode she has a one-on-one with Zaza that goes incredibly hard. Zone ends up poisoning the water supply, causing everyone to get drunk, including automobiles. Pretty sure these two get so buzzed that they try getting freaky in public. But just when Zone thinks they have the one-up on our boys, Remi decides to get even more hammered, drinking an entire bottle of wine because she's mastered the martial arts style of Drunken Fist, or Zui Qian. I'm sorry in advance, which is a real thing. The show didn't like make this up. Like people used to actually get hammered and then would fight like this. So to recap, this episode is about how Remi, the youngest girl on the team, is such a skilled martial artist, she's able to blow up a monster while drunk off her ass. She's even able to translate this skill into piloting 5 Robo, causing the robot to look like a previously homeschooled college freshman. I will never understand why this show had poor ratings. In episode 5, Dongaros is turning babies into eggs because it makes them easier to kidnap. To be honest, regular babies already pretty easy to kidnap. I think he's overcomplicating this. We also find out in this episode that Fumiya and Remi can communicate telepathically because they're twins.
よし、あれでいっか。
そうよ、それよ。
なんだい、あれだのそれだのって。
俺たちは双子だぜ。
2といえば
This is the only time they do this in the entire show. The monster of the week hits especially hard for these two, as they were separated by their parents when they were only babies as well. So to solve the problem, Fumiya pretends to be a baby and bait out the alien. And that doesn't work because They're interrupted by this intergalactic baby that claims to be Dongaros's son, which he disowns because he refuses to pay child support, which prompts Fumiya to cuss him out in space talk. Episode 6 is the third yellow focus episode in a row where Zone plans to turn the people of Japan lazy, and somehow during this process, she teaches a kid the value of hard work. The only other point of interest in this episode is that apparently Yellow Mask makes a cameo in this scene, but I've never seen Mask Man, so this is just like some lady when I first watched it. Episode 7 starts out with an incredibly tense mech scene. Dongaros is baiting out the Fiveman with a giant monster, causing Blue and Pink to drive into a set of landmines he's planted around the battlefield. They actually combine all the mecha together into this trailer mode thing in order to transport them to safety, which I didn't know they could do, and I'm pretty sure they only use this one time as well. They're successful in bringing Ken to safety, but they discover that they just forgot Kazumi, who was left behind with a giant monster. They send out Fumiya to save her, and he's actually able to communicate with this monster, which leads to the discovery that the monster of the week is actually from a planet of giant aliens, and is in fact 5 years old. He's only here because Dongaros promised to help the child skip school, and the reason he wants to skip class so badly is because he sucks at math. So Kazumi, being a math teacher, decides to tutor him when he discovers that he actually messes heavy with the subject and ends up getting a 100 on his next quiz. This has to be the most insane tonal switch up in a single episode of Sentai history. Like the beginning of this episode is genuinely so tense and drama filled, and then Kazumi teaches a child how awesome math is. I know this is a kid show, but like it really takes you out of it when that's the lesson of the week. The next episode, Gaku receives a distress signal from the planet Crystalia, not to be confused with the planet Crystaria from Kira Major, and I cannot tell if they are the same word. I honest to God do not know if this is one of those weird situations that happens sometimes when translating L's and R's in Japanese, and I'm really afraid of being called a bigot right now, so please do not cancel me. I do know that they're not in fact the same planet, because while they have similar names, I know for damn sure that ain't one of the rock people. Ken points out that this could be another trap from Zone, but Gaku decides that even if there's the smallest opportunity to save the last member of this fallen planet, he will still risk his life to do so. Calling back to episode 3, showing that this is one of the major themes of the show, that even if there is the smallest chance of success, it is still worth trying. It turns out not to be a trap, but she ends up sacrificing herself to save Gaku from being destroyed as a thanks for his kindness. In this next episode, the Fiveman are confronted with Ginga Sentai Gingaman, not to be confused with Seiju Sentai Gingaman. I'm not surprised they reused the name. These guys are so forgettable that even if Toei did remember who they were, they probably didn't even care. Voice actress Yuriko Fuchizaki makes a cameo in this episode as a news reporter, and she just does the absolute most with this role. She genuinely gives a standout performance. So the Gingaman are a team of aliens that claim to have been survivors of other planets that have previously been destroyed by Zone. And I was really like, wow, this is such a cool concept. I can't wait to see what they do with this. Guess what? Nothing. And embarrassingly, I only just now realized that these fools have been around since episode 1 while editing. They're a fake group created by Zone as a ploy to create good press in hopes to receive more media coverage. The plan is to stage a fight that will be broadcasted on an international news channel, during which a monster will use its brainwashing powers on live TV to hypnotize the viewers and take over the world, all the while creating bad press for the Fiveman, meaning that Zone is staging fake attacks against themselves in order to rally the public against their enemy through aggressive media coverage. Sound familiar? George Bush? Overall, it's a pretty good episode, probably one of the more memorable ones from the first half of the show. The Fiveman continuing to fight regardless of public opinion just further pushes the point of being willing to risk everything regardless of the potential outcome. Everything works out in the end, and the Fiveman never really defeat the Gingaman until the last few episodes. They're kind of just like around for the rest of the series. There's like no real plot development or payoff with this rivalry. which makes them really feel like wasted potential. Like, if these fools had actual decent suits, like the Nezai Rangers or the Kunoichi Gang even, that alone probably would have put these fools into a much higher bracket for me. I feel like this really could have been so much cooler. Final point of note is that this is the only episode with a full team roll call, which is like so weird because that sounds impossible. Like, what do you mean a Sentai team has only ever done a full roll call in a single episode? They made a point to do it every week in Zenkaiger. Not to mention the sound design on this is just absolutely atrocious. They're playing this loud ass music while bro's on the piano doing whatever he thinks he's doing. Like, I would have preferred a Vine Boom over this. At least that doesn't sound like shit. Episode 10, Fumiya eats too much and then dies. That's it. There's also this fool that's a survivor of one of the first planets destroyed by Zone. He's looking for vengeance against Doldora, specifically for his little sister. He's also part robot now because of an accident involving Zone, and he needs to suck human blood to power his circuitry. Fumiya catches him lurking on some little girls when he literally sacrifices his neck for theirs. And this guy's like, you're seriously willing to lay down your life for other people? How do you expect to get vengeance for your parents? But then Fumiya explains that the Fiveman are not out for vengeance, but rather to protect lives and fight for love, a sentiment inspired by their parents' values, leading to the two getting into a spat that's interrupted by Doldora, and the vampire alien actually ends up laying his life down to save Fumiya in the end. The episode's cool enough. If they put that fool in a green outfit, people would geek it on Twitter over him like once a month like they do X1 Mask. In the next episode, we discover that Ken has a gambling addiction. Little out of nowhere, but this feels in character for him. He spends most of the episode hanging out with another little boy. They, once again, already knew each other. I assume he's like one of his students. They're searching for treasure that may or may not potentially exist, but Ken decides to entertain it anyways, while Zone is also doing the same thing. The two parties are actually in possession of different halves of the same map. We discover that the little boy is actually searching for this in hopes it can be used to help rebuild the school. And I should drive home the fact that even if this treasure is not real, he's still willing to hunt for it anyways. He makes a point to say that. And they actually end up finding the treasure called the Anti-Gravity Stone, which we're led to believe is able to grant the holder the ability to fly, but it ends up just floating away. So like, yeah, and in fact it is the Anti-Gravity Stone, but it's also just useless. During the mech battle, Gaku decides to let Ken take full control of 5 Robo, and he ends up playing whack-a-mole with a monster of the week. And I mention this because I really like how you could see how different pilots change the way 5 Robo operates. It's a really cool detail that I just dig a lot. Episode 12 opens on a mecha battle that results in the Fiveman being ejected from the robot. The team are in a pinch thanks to Billion and the monster of the week, but Arthur arrives to assist in battle, something I've never seen Alpha 5's fuck ass do. I know Colin controlled Live Robo a handful of times, but not once was she willing to take a bullet for Yusuke. Arthur decides to pull his trump card, releasing the energy from his high voltage circuitry to force Zone into retreating. This leaves him in critical condition, and the Fiveman are unable to find him. He's discovered in a junkyard by a boy named Taro, who we see being picked on for hanging out there. He's able to repair Arthur's circuitry and turns him into a Republican. By that I mean he now has a red hat and an affinity for assaulting minors. Really, he's just now programmed to be Taro's little brother and protect him from bullies, now calling him Jiro. Eventually, he's discovered by Billion and the monster of the week, where he's able to go bar for bar against them for a brief moment, until the monster decides to overcharge his system, causing him to go haywire. Gaku eventually discovers Arthur's whereabouts and attempts to take him home, but he's having a hard time getting him to leave Taro, since he doesn't have his memories right now. They're attacked again when Arthur is hit just in the right way, causing him to regain his memories, with Taro clinging to him for safety in the same way that Gaku did on the day he was separated from his parents. This shock to his system also helps him remember a long-forgotten setting he had in his memory banks, and he actually asks Taro to help recalibrate him as the Fiveman fight off Billion and the monster of the week. And just as it seems as though the team is at their wits' end, Arthur transforms into a frickin' Blicky, which the Fiveman used to destroy the monster. So mind you, their parents did not just leave them with a robot babysitter, because he's also a gun, just in case. The episode ends with Arthur offering to play with Taro whenever he's able to find time. Episode 13 is another yellow focus episode. Not complaining because I actually really do like Remi, It just feels like she gets way more focus than the other Fiveman for whatever reason. Or maybe it's just because like her episodes are way more memorable. That's probably it. She's teaching a band class because she's substituting for one of her friends who is ill. And she actually has another really good unmorphed fight with Zaza again, which is prompted by her destroying all the instruments from Remi's class. And this is because the only way to defeat the monster of the week is through the power of music. So the Fiveman cobbled together a bunch of makeshift instruments, teaching the children resilience in that anything can be an instrument. And they destroy the monster using song. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I fell asleep watching this. Episode 14 opens on a little girl lying to her friends about knowing the Fiveman, and they rightfully call her out. Originally, I thought she was just like one of their students or something, but she actually is just a little shit. Zone ends up catching wind of this, leading to her getting kidnapped in hopes that she leads them to the magma base. And she continues to double down on the lie, leading them to a lake that coincidentally Fumiya happens to be fishing at. He rescues her and brings her back to the base to run her vitals while she pretends to be passed out. Seizing the opportunity to actually become friends with the Fiveman, she begins to explore the magma base, setting off a number of alarms that the monster of the week is able to hear, because he's a bat, I guess. The team finds her and she claims to have lost her memory. Fumiya claims he'll do his best to help her get back in shape. Meanwhile, Ken refuses to believe her based on a gut instinct, which I like because, as I said earlier, Ken is more intuitive and goes off vibes, unlike his siblings who are kind of more book smart. The little girl begins to become ashamed of her lying, prompting her to run off again and take one of the mech for a joyride. It's stuff like this that I don't want to have kids right now, because like I would crash out if a child stole my car. I don't know what I'm capable of, actually. I'm really trying to feel the emotions I would feel with that. I don't know what I'm capable of, and I'm scared. I'm scared of myself right now. The Fiveman are able to save her again. Meanwhile, Zone is able to attach a tracking device on her while they're out at the base. Thankfully, the Fiveman are able to destroy the monster of the week before they get to the magma base, resulting in a mech battle. What? I don't know if they just like didn't have time for a mech battle this episode, or like they just didn't want to do it. But I'm not gonna lie, this pissed me off when I first watched it. I would have rather they just skipped the Golden sequence entirely than find out he's a lame. The Golden's a lame. Are you kidding me? He's lame. At the very tail end of the episode, the little girl is rewarded for being a lying piece of shit as the Fiveman arrive to greet her classmates, verifying her claims. So remember, kids, it's okay to lie if you can show results. Episode 15, Gaku is on a walk when he comes across a Shidon flower, the same flower from episode 1. Garo reveals that it was planted by him to bait Gaku into a confrontation because he knew that he would smell it. He actually says that. He was certain that Gaku's nose would pick up on it all the way from his house. And it worked. Bro's got crystal clear nasal cavities. The two engage in a sword fight that ends in an explosion after Garo impaled his sword into a car engine. Post-battle, Gaku is frustrated with his performance, obsessing over a certain technique used by Garawa during the fight. This causes him to train into exhaustion, to the point where the other Fiveman have to stop him. More than anything, his emotions are stirred by Garawa using such a sentimental item against him. Meadow escalates the situation by growing the Shidon flower to an unprecedented size and gives it the ability to attack children. Obviously, this is another attempt to bait Gaku, but with him being unable to battle, Ken has a plan. The Fiveman is literally just a team of individuals focused on spitting the toughest lines in Sentai history, I think. I think that's what they are. And from out of nowhere, Five Red arrives to save a girl from being captured by Garawa, who uses the Shidon flower to isolate the two from the other Fiveman, challenging him to a duel, which is interesting since Gaku arrives at the magma base still tired from the battle from earlier. Arthur quickly shuts off the monitor to hide what's happening from him as Five Red is unable to hold his own against Garawa until Are there any other instances of Rangers mixing and matching suits like this? I don't know why, but like the blue helmet on the red body it's kind of a cool novelty. Gaku just so happens to turn on the monitor at the same time it's revealed that Ken has been pretending to be 5 red. He quickly runs into battle just in time to have Ken tap out, and the two begin to have at it once more. With Gaku being the first to grow tired, he remembers a quote from Arthur earlier in the episode, that softness overcomes strength, giving Gaku the courage to parry Garo's attack, injuring him on the same part of his face that he shot him 20 years ago. During the mech battle, a Gorlin is essentially entangled by the vines from the Shidon flower and uses it to constrict 5 Robo as well. Gaku decides to exit from the mecha, jumping out from the head and striking the flower directly with his sword. Apologizing for the violence against it, he promises to have another bloom properly one day with his own hands. He's so damn cool. I love Gaku. Okay, I love Gaku. In episode 16, another fuck-ass kid is taking inappropriate pictures of little girls with his camera. The monster of the week is like really fast, and the kid has to take a picture of it for the 5-man to be able to understand what's happening. It's another Remi focus episode though, so that's pretty cool. I'm starting to think she might be one of Soda's favorite characters too, because I honestly can't remember the last time Ken or Kazumi got any focus. In episode 17, Zone is studying footage and have come to the realization that the 5-man are too close and need to find a way to break them up if they ever want to get ahead. And based on my limited life experience, I can tell you that the easiest way to make a man switch up on his friends is to introduce him to a fly honey in a tight dress. And that is exactly what they do to Fumiya. Doldora disguises herself as a human and seduces him, driving a wedge between him and his siblings. They make a point to mention how she shares the same name as his dead mother, and they get a little extra weird about it because Kazumi assumes that's the reason he wants to bone her so bad, because she's like his mom. She ends up mind controlling him, but it very quickly becomes apparent to his siblings that something's up, because his mannerisms don't match up with how he'd normally react to situations. Gaku specifically noting this head scratch Fumiya does whenever he's embarrassed. It comes to a head when a brainwashed Fumiya attempts to stab Gaku in his sleep, and they end up finding a way to undo the brainwashing. And they have this really impactful speech about the bond between siblings, mentioning how they notice when the slightest things are off with Fumiya, given how they've all grown up together. Ken especially noting the smell of Fumiya's piss. Episode 18 is another episode that focuses more on some random child than the 5-man. A little boy is so obsessed with saving money in his piggy bank that he himself turns into a little piggy. Kazumi teaches him the valuable lesson that money isn't everything, and who the hell cares? Look how cool Fumiya looks. Alright, so you remember the giant toddler from episode 7? He's back. I was originally going to skip talking about that episode until I realized he's actually pertinent to the plot, which was not on my bingo card. He's high on life, remembering how awesome his brief adventure with the 5-man was, until he runs into this red robot, which he actually confuses for 5 Robo. Excited to tell it that he's now the top student in his math class, the robot decides to smack him across the face, demanding to fight the strongest warrior he knows. And the child, of course, says he'll never be able to defeat 5 Robo. Meaning that if they killed this child like Fumiya wanted, and Kazumi never taught him how to add 5 plus 2, the 5-man would have never received their second mecha. He now has more plot significance than all of the Gingaman. The red robot arrives on Earth demanding to battle 5 Robo, and the siblings of course oblige this request and begin fighting. Upon analyzing the robot, Arthur notes that it's made of the same alloy as 5 Robo, which is a special combination of metals created specifically by their father. Along with it having the same energy type and the engine's RPM matching 5 Robos, the team comes to the conclusion that this robot was made by their father. Arthur finds this preposterous because, as far as he knew, their father only ever created 5 Robo and the Magma base. If this was actually created by Professor Hoshikawa, it would have had to have been built after the events of episode 1, meaning he might still be alive. The 5-man are now determined to find who is piloting this robot. As the battle escalates, the siblings are thrown out of their mecha, and this is when the pilot of the red mecha reveals himself as Raging Galactic Wolf, Gunther. He refuses to answer how he got the robot and begins to attack the Fiveman on ground. Unluckily for him, the Fiveman are in the mood to beat ass, and they don't even morph. A Gorlin arrives to take the red robot hostage, with Billion taking Gunther to the Volgyre to meet the rest of Zone. Gunther's surprised to find Zone on this planet and damns them for spoiling his victory. He agrees to join up with them if it means defeating the Fiveman, and Meadow gifts the robot a giant staff similar to the one Gunther wields in person, which Five Robo proves to be no match for. Fumiya begins to question how they could possibly defeat Gunther, but Gaku notices a small hatch on the belt of the red robot. The Rangers pin the staff to the side of Five Robo as Gaku exits the mecha, scaling it in order to get to the belt. The door hesitates to open for Gaku, but after some time, he's able to get inside and enters the cockpit Green Ranger style, attempting to throw Gunther out of it. They accidentally hit the controls on the mecha, causing it to go haywire and fall off a cliff, prompting an emergency transformation, turning it into a spacecraft and flying away with Gaku and Gunther inside. In part 2 of this conflict, the spacecraft crash lands into the side of a mountain, causing Gunther and Gaku to fall out and roll down a cliff. The two do not hesitate and begin climbing in hopes to get to the red robot first. Zone sends out a monster to immobilize both of them. Thankfully, the other Fiveman arrive just in time to help. It grows giant, and the Fiveman are nowhere near Five Robo, leaving the spaceship vulnerable, until Arthur dives into the monster while piloting Five Robo on his own. Gaku remains with Gunther as his siblings enter Five Robo to help Arthur. It's here where Gaku decides to tell Gunther their story and how they were separated from their parents on the planet Shidon. Convinced that they were dead, this robot revitalized their belief that they might still be out there. This causes Gunther to pause, but when Five Robo begins to glow, Gaku decides to enter it to help his siblings, with Gunther following close behind. Once inside the cockpit, a voice can be heard from the speaker overhead. It calls out for Gaku, Ken, Kazumi, Remi, and Fumiya. The five are in shock as they hear their father's voice for the first time in 20 years. Some for the first time ever. Professor Hoshikawa explains that this message is automatically sent to them if Star Carrier is ever to come in contact with Five Robo. He goes on to mention how the two machines can be combined to form Super Five Robo, and ends the message saying how he believes in all of them. Gaku is now determined to enter Star Carrier on foot. When the giant monster blasts a laser directly at him, Gunther pushes him aside and takes the blast for Gaku. Gunther, now laying on the ground, has a message for him about the machine, but before he can say anything, the attack from the monster slowly turns his body to stone. Now, more determined than ever, Gaku runs through a field of explosions and enters Star Carrier, performing the Super Brother joint, as technically the mecha are also siblings since they were also created by their father. They transform into Super 5 Robo, defeating the monster using the Super Vector Punch. At the end of the episode, the five siblings and Arthur promise to find answers about their missing parents and continue to fight to protect this planet. Intermission! Now, what if I told you that Chikyu Sentai Fiveman was actually adapted into a Power Rangers series? You probably wouldn't believe me at first, but I think most of you probably know where I'm going with this. Super Megaforce was the 20th anniversary celebration of Power Rangers, and infamously is the season known for introducing new powers that were never previously seen before on Earth, retroactively adding 6 unadapted Sentai teams to Power Rangers canon. This was clearly just a lazy excuse to use more Sentai footage that otherwise wouldn't make sense, but there is a precedent for this, which by the way retroactively means that you need to watch my 3-hour video on Power Rangers Dino Thunder before continuing, but in case you don't have the time for that, in Power Rangers Dino Thunder episode 18, Bully for Ethan, Dr. O invited Kira to the lab to help him sort out some old files, some of which are branded with emblems from previously unadapted Sentai teams, one of which is garnished with the emblem from Fiveman. Or the Supersonic Power Rangers, as Gia refers to them in Super Megaforce episode 19. I can understand if some of you think that just having some minor Easter eggs in Tommy's lab isn't enough to justify introducing random new suits to the canon without reason, but Boom Studios actually made some of these suits relevant through some comic exclusive stories, such as the Squadron Rangers being the main characters in the Power Rangers Universe comic. Similarly, the Supersonic Rangers are the team of focus in the comic exclusive story Psychotic, a bonus story included with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 2 Years Deluxe Edition collection. It was also reprinted for the special comic Power Rangers Psychopath, which was far cheaper to find on eBay, so that's what we're working with. But in order to understand that, we first need to look into Mighty Morphin Power Rangers issue 20. And I should note that while I consider myself to be an expert with getting around YouTube's copyright system when it comes to niche Japanese television kids shows, I've never worked with comics before, so bear that in mind when it comes to some of the visuals here, because they might not be super interesting. It's 1969 and Grace Sterling, a scientist from NASADA, which is the Power Rangers version of NASA, is looking up to the stars after the first successful mission to the moon. She believes that she is more deserving of going to space than the astronauts currently there, but because she's a woman, she'll never have the chance. While being comforted by one of her coworkers, she's very quickly teleported to the power chamber, where she is greeted by a Vietnam War veteran, a Russian intelligence analyst, a loudmouth political activist, and worst of all, a Brit. Zordon and Alpha have brought them to the command center as the moon landing has caused Psycho Green to awaken from his stasis. Previously, his ship was shot down by the two of them when they detected him attempting to reawaken Rita Repulsa. Grace, always wanting to go to the moon, quickly convinces the others to agree to the mission, and they're sent to take down Psycho Green before he can find the space dumpster, morphin into the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers team. Upon arriving to the moon, it becomes incredibly obvious that no one on this team likes each other, compromising the mission and causing 3 out of the 5 Rangers to be sacrificed in the process, though they are successful, making them no longer necessary, causing Zordon and Alpha to revoke their powers at the end of the issue. This issue is actually really cool for the series overall, because it gives context as to why Zordon and Alpha would pick 5 random teenagers that just so happen to be best friends rather than trained professionals, given the experience that happened with the 1969 team. But the reason I bring this up is because this is technically our first introduction to Psycho Green, and his origin is told to us in Psychotic. The story begins with our supersonic Red Ranger, Ace, having a vision of the battle ahead, where we see the Fiveman, or the Supersonic Rangers, have defeated a group of the same foot soldiers from the Sentai, which is a really neat detail. They also have the same sidearms, and Sky Alpha is in the comic too, which, like I said, is really dope, and I feel like they did not have to include that. Ace often uses his visions to plan out their battles beforehand, and he briefs his team on the strategy for the upcoming events, which just so happens to exclude the Supersonic Green Ranger, an exclusive 6th Ranger for this team made specifically for this story, kinda like the Titanium Ranger. His name is Trek, and he is sick of Ace excluding him from plans because he does not appear in his visions. My headcanon is that Supersonic Green just doesn't appear in 5-man footage. Anyways, he sets off a fucking bomb and kills the rest of his teammates. They give some reason as to why Ace couldn't see it in his vision, but it really doesn't matter. What does matter is that he was instructed to do this by Dark Spectre, who turns him into the first ever Psycho Ranger, Psycho Green, which he is able to do because of Trek's pre-existing connection to the Morphing Grid, which adds to the lore of the Psycho Rangers, as it implies that they are all fallen Rangers from previous failed teams. He's also sent on a mission to reawaken Rita Repulsa on the moon, which leads to the events of issue 20. I really like this story too, because like I said, it adds to the lore of the Psycho Rangers and gives them more context as to why other Sentai suits would appear in Megaforce. Maybe those two are fallen Ranger teams. Now, I can't say that I've talked about everything to do with the Supersonic Rangers if I don't conclude Supersonic Green's story in Psychopath, as he revives the other Psycho Rangers and kidnaps Corone with the intentions of turning her back into Astronema. This is honestly going to be the weakest comic we've looked at so far, because the entire story revolves around Corone attempting to rehabilitate the Psycho Rangers, and it low-key implies them being redeemed at the end of the story, which I think goes against the essence of what made the Psycho Rangers interesting in the first place, because they're literally meant to be mindless, corrupt rangers with one singular goal. Attempting to humanize them in any way, I feel like misses the entire point of these characters. Andros attempts to save her from Psycho Green, but gets frustrated with her when she tells him not to fight the other Psychos, and rightfully so. The narrative paints this as if Andros is out of whack for wanting to end the Psycho Rangers for good, but like he's objectively so valid for wanting this because the Psychos give little to no reason as to why we should believe they are capable of being redeemed. The issue ends with them destroying Psycho Green, and the original 5 Psychos are left wandering space, not knowing what to do with themselves now. And with that, we have now gone over everything to do with the Supersonic Rangers in any context, really. I'd honestly really like it if Boom Studios made more comics following the Supersonic Rangers adventures, maybe before even the introduction of Trek, just to show them saving the world and give them a greater presence in the legacy of the canon. But yeah, this is all pretty cool. Boom, hit me up if you want to lab about another Supersonic comic. I genuinely think I could write a better story than Psychopath. Episode 21 opens on these 3 schoolboys having a hard time vaulting a horse. I've never heard of this before. Maybe it's a cultural thing, but like, did they make you do this at your school? Anyways, the 3 have a plan to contact the sibling teachers, and they're shocked to find that their message is answered, saying that the rumors are true and you actually can contact them via computer. Ken does this Sporticus stuff and takes it upon himself to teach the 3 kids how to climb a horse or whatever. He identifies one to be a nerd, another one to be smaller than most kids, and one he refers to as Konishiki, which for the unfamiliar is the name of a sumo wrestler. Little messed up. I really do like this episode because I feel like Ken makes this really good analogy about taking the bold leap. It can easily be tied back to the theme of taking risks for a better future, except we're talking about horse box. Ken also refuses to morph this episode when fighting, in hopes to show the kids that bravery, along with physical fitness, doesn't have to be tied with superpowers, which is a really good lesson for the kids at home as well. Not to mention, it makes for a really good fight scene watching Ken solo the monster of the week entirely unmorphed, another incredibly raw moment of the show for the books. They also use Starfire in this episode, and since I didn't mention it during its debut, I actually think it's a really cool mecha. I think the design is dope, and I like the way it forms around 5 Robo. It has this finishing attack called the Hang Beam, where it uses one of its guns to pick up the monster and then the other to shoot it, which really makes you question why they don't just shoot it with the first gun to begin with. But I like to think it's because they enjoy watching monsters squirm before they die. The next episode, Kazumi is injured in battle, passing out in the woods while separated from her teammates. She wakes up inside the house of a young scientist named Koji Yuki. He's developing a technique to crystallize solar power in hopes it'll help plants grow and restore our natural environment. A dream that Kazumi notes is similar to her father, and he's doing this despite being told by everyone that it's a pipe dream, risking social embarrassment for the slightest chance to do good. Through Kazumi's help, he's able to create this crystal, but when the 5-man fall during battle, he's forced to use it to revive them into fighting shape, which ends up shattering his creation, sacrificing his dream for the greater good. In episode 23, Fumiya is putting on a puppet show with the local youths, centered around the adventures of the 5-man. And of course, in his version of the story, 5 Black is the strongest ranger on the team. Obviously, at the end of the episode, he learns this lesson about teamwork and how that's what makes the 5-man so strong. It's a cute story and has a very nice lesson for the kids at home, and the dolls are sentient. They come to life, they fucking breathe, they are alive, they have thoughts. And it's not due to some villainous activity either. They literally just come to life out of nowhere, and for the next 10 episodes, the show will just randomly cut to the 5 dolls in this box as they commentate different segments of the episode. The actual 5-man, like the actual physical people, never learn about this, and the show never really like addresses it or does anything with this concept. It's cute, but it's a weird thing to introduce in episode 23, like seemingly out of nowhere. Ironically, from what I've seen online, this seems to be one of the most memorable parts of the show for a lot of people, and I think I get it. If this were like introduced in episode 1 or like even like 5 or 6, like I wouldn't be this shocked, but just like randomly they start doing this and it doesn't even like last the entire season, and there's no payoff to it either. Like they don't do anything. They just stop. They just stopped doing it at episode 35, and it's barely a fourth of the show, and I don't know why they bothered doing this. In the next episode, a monster from Zone hosts a ninja academy to better train the foot soldiers, and one of them is really bad at it. Remi ends up befriending him, saying his life is just as important as a human's life, and 3 minutes later he dies. The episode ends with Remi and her siblings mourning their lost friend in a very sweet and sentimental moment that's commentated by the Five Dolls. In the next episode, there is this lion monster that can summon asteroids that Zone plans to use to blow up a giant volcano, a sentence that only Toei would make me say. The five-man book a flight to investigate the reports of meteorites falling into Sakurajima, an actual volcano located in the Kagoshima prefecture in Kyushu. While on the plane, they witness a teenage boy fly past them at Mach speed. Turns out the boy is friends with the lion monster because the two used to be performers in the intergalactic circus. Just work with me, okay? It didn't sound this dumb when I wrote it down. The lion ends up joining Zone after they destroyed the circus venue, claiming that the only way to survive is to follow the strong. The two end up reconciling their differences after the lion monster is reminded of all of the good times they had at the circus, while Five Robo is dressed like a clown. We're now on episode 26. It's Kyushu Day, huh? Arguably the most important one we've gone over so far. It picks up with the five-man still on their vacation in the Kagoshima prefecture, and the foot soldiers are lined up, and one of them is admiring an intergalactic clock as Garawa descends from a helicopter. They're making plans to attack as now the five-man have seemingly let their guard down, and just as Garawa is about to detail his strategies, one of the foot soldiers interrupts him to announce that according to his clock, today is Topsy-Turvy Day, a day celebrated by Zone once every 20 years in which the ranks are reversed, putting the foot soldiers at the head of the totem pole above the five main generals, leaving Garawa at the very bottom. The entire episode sees the villains abusing him, and I really want to point out this one scene where Garawa and the Monster of the Week are chasing the five-man in some car they stole. I feel like it's really rare that we ever have car chase scenes in Sentai in general, but they absolutely demolish the five-man's rental. Imagine being the Enterprise worker having to do the paperwork for that one. Generally, I did not think they had the budget to actually mess up the car like that, let alone two. And of course, no tense moment in the show is complete without cutting to the Five Dolls, because that is perfectly in tone for what's happening in any given situation. The episode ends with the foot soldiers making an attempt to take out the five-man and Garawa at the same time in retaliation for all of the abuse he's caused them. And it appears to have worked. The other generals begin to bow their heads and grieve the loss of their fallen companion, but suddenly, the five-man pull up on a train, followed by Garawa and the Monster of the Week not that far behind. Shortly after this, the five-man are able to defeat the monster and depart home, admiring the beauty of the Kagoshima prefecture from inside their plane. This episode is really dumb on paper, and like I said, is really important for this series, as it is the least viewed episode in Five-Man, and is to this day the third worst performing Sentai episode of all time. Episode 26 is the absolute lowest low for this series, so obviously it could only get better from here, right? But how did we get to this point? I think one of the main issues with Five-Man thus far is just how little we've learned about the actual Five-Man. While it isn't necessarily strange for Sentai shows to focus on the team helping a new character each week solve their problems, I think what Five-Man struggles with is just how much focus they give these children and intergalactic monsters compared to our main cast. And this goes for both heroes and villains. Thus far, episodes have only really scratched surface level details about our core five, and at this point, we know almost next to nothing about the villains. Since we've come back from our intermission, the episodes have been centered around a trio of weak schoolboys, a young scientist, more school children, along with the doll replicas of the Five-Man, a foot soldier in a ninja outfit, circus performers, and another episode on the foot soldiers. All before we ever get an actual episode that pushes any of the narrative forward for literally anyone in the main cast. Unless you want to exclude the episode where Fumiya learned a very important lesson about teamwork, which is really not that interesting at all when you consider that this is Super Sentai and the entire point of the show is teamwork. That's literally the entire show. Before the intermission, we had just gotten off an amazing two-parter where the team is confronted with the voice of their long-lost father and the revelation that their parents may still be alive. And we have gotten nothing about that in the past 6 episodes. I think it makes sense why viewership would start to fumble at this point, given how nothing seems to matter. But we've now hit a critical point in the series, with ratings at all-time lows. It should be interesting to see how Hirohisa Soto responds to this now. Remember, though, that we are talking about television broadcast metrics in the early 90s. Things aren't going to change overnight. But I do think that they introduced something in episode 28, and the following episodes as well, that is really responsible for the show bouncing back in the way it did. But first, we need to talk about episode 27, If You Sleep, You Die. Gaku is out catching bugs with some local schoolboys. Did y'all hang out with your teachers this much as a kid? I'm really starting to question the appropriateness of the Fiveman's relationship with these little kids, because there's no reason for him to do this. Gaku is actively making the decision to spend his time hanging out with a 6-year-old. Doldora sends a praying mantis for the two of them to catch that just so happens to be the monster of the week that is able to infiltrate Gaku's dreams while he's sleeping. He wakes up to the revelation that any injuries he receives in his dreams carry over to the real world. After this, he somehow convinces the rest of the Fiveman to go bug catching with him, and Remi begins to fall asleep. The praying mantis monster enters her dreams as well. Her siblings crowd around her to witness scratches develop on her face while she's asleep. Concluding that this must be the work of Zone, the Fiveman make it their mission to stay awake for as long as possible. Seizing the opportunity to get the siblings while they're sleep deprived, Doldora begins to attack the Fiveman, causing great injury and force them to retreat. And during the confrontation, she also throws smoke bombs at them containing sleeping gas, and they pass out regardless of the 5 dolls encouraging them not to fall asleep, and they begin to have a collective dream. The little boy randomly decides to start messing with the prey mantis they caught earlier, shoving a stick into his chest. It's sadistic and weird, but it does cause the monster to lose control, freeing the Fiveman from their dreams and allowing them to defeat the monster of the week. This next episode is the one that I think is actually the turning point for the series, and I think you'll see why in a second. It opens on a massive spaceship descending to Earth, bumping the 1978 hit single Hero by the Kai Band. It's a great song. Of course, I've never heard of it before watching this episode. Judging by the YouTube comments, it's like Japanese divorced dad music, which means it's incredible. I'll link the song in the description. The song is actually being sung by the ship's pilot, Chevalier, the previous captain of the Volgyre, before Garawa took over. He's an undefeated general of Zone and has been summoned by Meadow to make up for Garawa's consistent failures to destroy Earth. Unironically, he's an incredible singer, causing the girls to swoon, and I really can't blame them either. He radiates pure swagger. The battle with Chevalier escalates to a mech fight, with the boys not receiving any help from their sisters, causing Big Bad Arthur to have to step in piloting 5 Robo. GOAT. Eventually, the girls snap out of it, but both mecha are damaged to the point where they're unable to combine. Gaku runs across a massive field, dodging explosions left and right to help Arthur repair 5 Robo, also goated. Eventually, they realize that the sound waves from Chevalier's chorus are interrupting the frequencies between 5 Robo and Starfire, which is why they're unable to combine, as they cannot communicate with one another. To combat this, Remi conducts the Rangers and Arthur to perform their own song to counter the effects of Chevalier's, and you'll never guess what they sing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Fiveman.
I get it, it's a little corny, but we let the Kyoryugers get away with this in their last episode, so like, if they get a pass, everyone gets a pass. This does mean that the show's intro exists within the universe of the show, which is interesting, but like, I guess it's plausible given that Remi's a music teacher. This allows them to combine the two mecha, making light work of Chevalier's monster. We end the episode with him admiring the Ranger's strength, excited to see how entertaining their battle will be. The next episode introduces new ways for Zone to bring in monsters of the week. Previous to this, new monsters were assumed to be pre-existing aliens from Zone's army, but from here forward they will be a combination of two different animals' DNA, in this instance a crab and an ant. The episode begins with the twins enjoying their day on a motorcycle ride when they're attacked by Chevalier's crab monster. Thankfully, their older siblings arrive and they're saved for a brief moment until Garawa's ant monster appears out of nowhere, throwing both parties off. Having two active monsters out at once is what gives Garawa the idea to fuse them. With their combined powers and the knowledge of where the magma base is, thanks to a previous episode, Garawa sends this fusion monster to destroy it using its acid bubbles. Not super intimidating, but it works. The five-man are forced to fight the monster in close quarters, and thankfully Gaku is able to eject the monster from their home thanks to his quick thinking. But it grows giant and gives the Rangers trouble while piloting 5 Robo. They attempt to call Starfire for backup, but Arthur finds Dongeros in the base's electrical system. He's damaged it to the point where they're not able to deploy the mecha. So Arthur decides to confront him head on using his Arthur Flash attack. Alpha 5 could never. He's able to hold them off for enough time to have Gaku arrive for backup. They're able to repair the electrical system, but Doldora and Zaza arrive, forcing Arthur to pilot the mecha alone, while Gaku stays back and does his best to hold them both off. He's able to force them both to retreat, but not before they knock him out of his suit, which leads to one of the best fights in the show as Gaku holds off Billion sword attacks in an unmorphed battle, kicking him directly in the teeth. You know I love a teeth kick. At this point, all monsters have been evacuated from the building, allowing Gaku to safely access the master controls of the base, where he initiates the Max Cross, combining the magma base with Super 5 Robo, transforming it into a humanoid form, calling it Max Magma. There's no way you looked at this giant spaceship in episode 1 and didn't think it was going to turn into a robot. It intimidatingly rolls into the battlefield, shooting all of its artillery in a single attack, defeating the fusion monster and saving the day. It's a really cool and interesting looking mecha, and it's the only time they ever use it in the entire show. Literally, Max Magma shows up once in episode 29, and like that maybe one more time in the finale, and then they never do it again. The next episode opens with the five-man playing dodgeball with a bunch of kids, as per usual, and Ken is just a beast on the court, doing backflips, catching balls with his feet, nailing kids in the face. Pause. Ironically, Chevalier has released a bunch of exploding dodgeballs to wreak havoc on the town, created by another fusion monster, this time being one half squid and one half egg. It's kinda like Splatoon, but instead of a squid kid, it's a squid fetus. It proves to be too much for the five-man, forcing them to retreat, and Chevalier also returns to the Volgeir. Meadow mentions that at this rate, Chevalier is on track to reclaim the captain spot from Garawa. Ken, now referring to himself as the king of dodgeball this episode, believes that's the only way to defeat these exploding eggs. The other five-man encourage him to plan strategically, but in typical Ken fashion, he rushes into the battle without thinking and gets his cheeks clapped. Afterwards, he stages a training session with the kids from earlier, lining them up and encouraging them to pelt him in the face with balls. Pause. And they do not hold back. Now Ken's chopped for the rest of the series, but this session leads the Rangers to the development of a new finishing technique, where they kick a soccer ball at the monster of the week. This is like a super common thing in the Showa era. At this point in the show's history, it's almost tradition for the Rangers to like nail the monster of the week with a football or something. They did it in Go Ranger, and they've done it most seasons. And this is also a really good character episode for Ken, as he learned to think before running into things, an issue he's clearly displayed in previous episodes. And having the monster of the week tie into his gym shtick just makes it work that much more. The big reveal at the end of the episode is a new type of Gorlin, now called a Black Gorlin, that's far more powerful than the previous ones, and does not need to fuse with the monster of the week in order to kick ass. This prompts the team's MVP, Arthur, to get called from the bench to pilot 5 Robo, as the Black Gorlin, in addition to the monster of the week, is too powerful for the 5-man alone. Eventually, the two robots together are able to destroy the monster of the week, prompting the Black Gorlin to fuck off. It appears in a few more episodes leading up to the series finale, but it's never really that big of a threat. Following this is yet another great character episode, as the youngest Fiveman, Remi, is having a nightmare about her mother being attacked by monsters. She is so distraught by this that she wakes up in the middle of the night to check a picture of her mother to assure that it was her in her dreams, because as stated previously, she really doesn't have any memories of her parents. Another fun detail of note is that both Remi and Fumiya are wearing the same pajamas in this scene, you know, because they're twins. Actually, this made me realize that the twins are almost always wearing similar, or in some cases the exact same outfits. I never realized that until I started editing this, and it's such a really cool and subtle detail, and I freaking love it. Remi checks the physical location of her dreams the next day to find her mother actually being attacked by a monster, where she once again proves her status as the team's most skilled fighter. I'm pretty sure it looks like she's doing most of her own stunts here. The other Fiveman arrive for backup and are surprised to find their mother after all these years. The three older siblings run to greet her, but Fumiya pauses for a moment. It's clearly hitting him the hardest, as he's never met his mother before. But eventually he collapses in her arms, and she recounts how she hasn't seen him since he was a baby. She is kidnapped once again by Zone, who uses her as bait to coerce the Fiveman into another encounter, but something bothers Gaku as he remembers his Five Blaster having no effects on the monster during their last battle, and ponders as to how their mother hasn't aged after all these years, leading him to come to the conclusion that it may be a mirage set up by Zone. And unfortunately, he's right. Remi refuses to believe this, as now 20 years later, she's finally felt the warmth of her mother's hands and refuses to lose it again. So she runs to rescue her without the help of her siblings and is now overpowered by Zone's forces. She ends up getting saved by my dog, Arthur, who is able to break the illusion using his technology. And Remi is forced to realize that her mother was never actually here. The Fiveman destroy the monster of the week, and post-battle they analyze a film strip that the monster was using to create this vision of her, and find that she was kidnapped by Zone at one point and is still alive out in space, causing them to now be more energized than ever to find their missing parents. Banger episode. Fiveman is cooking, and we have another banger up next, as it's Gaku's birthday. To celebrate, Arthur and his siblings are having a picnic with him when they are interrupted.
Happy birthday, Fiveman!
They're attacked by a new fusion monster that has the ability to stop and rewind time. A very overpowered ability. Like, he really does some major damage here. It's actually pretty crazy. You'd almost think for a second that, like, holy shit, he actually kills Five Red! The Fiveman are devastated. Fumiya wants to avenge his brother, but he's stopped by Arthur, claiming that it's too dangerous. Kazumi agrees, claiming that they've already lost. She gives up and decides to join Zone, not wanting anyone else in her family to suffer the same fate. Chevalier accepts her admission of defeat and makes her his slave. While at the base, she discovers that the monster's energy levels are tied to the consumption of diamonds. We then see her rob a jewelry store, putting actual civilian lives at risk. The other Fiveman beg her to stop this spree, but it's too late. When the monster is low on energy and needs to refuel, she takes him to the same jewelry store she just robbed. Confusingly, she's surprised to find that all of the diamonds are missing. But with the monster now desperate for energy, she informs him that Gaku's birthday gift was actually supposed to be a diamond watch this year. In that moment, the monster reverses the entire events of the past 24 hours, and we discover that this was all a setup for Kazumi to revive her older brother and defeat the monster of the week. This is probably the smartest plan any single character has come up with in all of Super Sentai. Another immaculate episode, literally 3 back-to-back bangers. In this next episode, Meadow has given Garawa one final chance to defeat the Fiveman. So he creates a Gorilla Falcon fusion monster, but bungles it and fuses them wrong, which is actually really funny because these things are already abominations on their own, but this one's just stupid. And he's also accidentally the strongest monster Zone has ever created, since both consciousnesses are constantly fighting for control, leading them to create tornadoes because they keep turning around so much. Meanwhile, Arthur finds Gaku's Menko collection, which I had to Google, but from what it looks like, they're Pogs, which I also had to Google to make sure I knew what I was looking at. Don't spell it wrong. But I guess they're like these things that are really hard to flip, and this spirals into the monster developing a gambling addiction. I'm not joking, that the Fiveman are able to use to destroy it. Not necessarily as deep as the last few episodes, but it's definitely a fun one and still progresses the plot in a meaningful way now that Garawa is threatened with losing his position as captain. Like I said, after episode 28, I really enjoyed the direction of Fiveman with these more character-focused episodes and, you know, slowly integrating the main plot in like tiny little ways. Ironically, after Topsy Turvy Day, the writers decided to do the opposite of what they were doing before, and that's start making actually interesting episodes. I literally can't see any way that they can continue this hot streak. There's a shark monster next episode? They did it. Garawa has officially been demoted and has to work his way back up, now acting as the Volgire's janitor, which is sad not only for him, but also his puppet counterpart. Yeah, remember those guys? I haven't. They've literally been in every episode, but I'm just now realizing that I forgot to mention the fact that Garawa also has a puppet counterpart. And they're gone next episode, so I figured I would just like sneak that in there real quick for anyone that really cared. For anyone that really wanted me to mention that. Anyways, the shark monster has the ability to can humans for Zone to eat, like a reverse tuna fish situation. It ends up canning Kazumi, Ken, and Fumiya, and Remi realizes that besides the Fiveman, the shark monster has been specifically targeting young girls with nice legs. Again, I cannot make some things up, prompting her to wear this dress and tantalize the shark monster into a trap where she and Gaku are able to defeat it. Yeah, so I had this theory that Remi was like the showrunner's favorite given how many focus episodes she's gotten. I assumed it was because she was an incredibly skilled martial artist, and I still think that. But this episode definitely makes me think there's a little more to that. There's definitely a dip in quality here, but still not as bad as the first half of the show, to be honest, and is actually still pretty entertaining. This next episode definitely makes up for it because it's one of the best in the show. Gaku is visiting a farm, the same place where his parents first met, which he actually visits often because he still feels like he can actually communicate with them when he's there. He's familiar with one of the workers on the farm, portrayed by Yoko Nakamura, the actress who played the Yellow Ranger on Flashman a few years prior. She explains to Gaku that even as the eldest sibling, a child is still a child, so he shouldn't feel bad that there are times when he needs emotional support from his parents. While this is happening, Chevalier is attacking with another fusion monster that's laying pipe on the other 4-5-man. They call Gaku for backup and he ends up arriving late to the encounter. The others grow frustrated with him because of how often he happens to go missing without telling anyone. But Gaku refuses to explain where he's been, upsetting them even more as they vowed to never keep secrets from one another. Chevalier shows up and Gaku is forced to fight alone as the others refuse to sustain more injuries at a time when they can't even trust their leader. Eventually, the four realize that this may be a life or death situation, but Gaku is able to get away before it escalates to that point. He returns to the flower bed where his parents met and asks them for advice. Frustrated because he's the eldest child, meaning that he spent the most time with them, but despite this, he still doesn't have all the answers. He's frustrated that he can't share the memories of his parents with his siblings out of fear that it'll sadden them. The woman from earlier hears him yelling to his parents in the abyss and watches him fall to his knees and cry. She finds his siblings and verbalizes Gaku's struggles for him. As the older brother, he'll never be able to open up about it on his own because of the burden he feels needing to protect his siblings and live up to his parents' expectations. As she's saying this, they begin to reminisce on how hard things have been for Gaku, needing to grow up so quickly, taking on all that responsibility. And we see an array of memories where Gaku was helping Ken with homework, cheering up Kazumi after a hard day, and the saddest one, in my opinion, going to a parent event at school for Remi and Fumiya. With this in mind, it becomes obvious why Gaku is so passionate about being a role model and helping children, which led to him becoming a teacher. This episode does a ton for Gaku's character, showing the relationship he's had with his siblings and how the loss of his parents have affected him growing up. It's absolutely tragic. This episode takes Gaku from being a pretty decent Red Ranger and makes him one of the best Reds in all of Sentai. It's an incredible character episode and is probably my favorite in the entire show, and might just be one of my favorite episodes of all of Super Sentai. I'm not even kidding. It's like this, that one about Jiraiya, and then like Racules. At the end, his siblings forgive him, and the five are able to defeat the monster of the week. Ken even notes that Gaku doesn't have to protect their feelings anymore now that they're all adults. Episode 36 is a classic body swap episode. Those of you familiar with Sentai should know what this entails at this point. Unironically though, I probably could not have asked for a better duo to swap bodies on the team, and it's cool because it further explores the twins' connection to each other. It doesn't get super deep about it, but it really doesn't have to. I already really like these characters as it is, so I really don't need any more complexities added to their relationship. I just want to see the two interact more. And it's nice to see them work together because the two actors actually do have really great chemistry. And in the next episode, Remi, Fumiya, and Kazumi are in combat with a pitch black warrior, able to break boulders with a single punch. Gaku and Arthur are at the magma base analyzing the data of its suit, causing Gaku to panic. The armor breaks to reveal Ken is the Black Warrior, and he is knocked unconscious from the sparring match with his siblings. It turns out Gaku and Arthur are developing a super crystallized alloy in hopes to create a armored power-up for the team. Ken becomes frustrated being the team's test dummy and questions how they can rely on such a thing to become strong, suggesting they focus on training their bodies to defeat Zone over using science to develop useless tech, which parallels the two fields of study taken up by each brother and reflects their ongoing conflict of butting heads with one another. Gaku wanting to meticulously develop plans and new technology for the team, and Ken just wanting to dive into things head first. And this is further shown in one of the lines mentioned by Ken in the episode, stating that nothing is impossible with the body his parents have given him. And I'm probably reading too much into it, but it could imply the different parenting styles their mom and dad had when raising Gaku and Ken, probably allowing Gaku to help more in the lab while Ken, being the younger brother, was able to go out and play more and do whatever he wanted, being told that he's capable of anything. I previously touched on this with how Remi and Fumiya didn't go into STEM fields, but I really like how each of the teacher's subjects fits their character. Fuck Kazumi, I guess, though, because I really have no clue how to fit math into her characterization. Ken begins to train alone to blow off some steam when he runs into some admins from Zone. Eventually, the rest of the team appears to back him up, but they're not much help. With their backs against the wall, Gaku inserts the V power grip into his belt, sending his suit into overdrive. Ken warns him that it could kill him, but being forced into a corner, Gaku makes the potentially sacrificial play in hopes to save his siblings, overclocking his power system and throwing his body into the monster of the week. It's not enough to defeat it, but fortunately, Gaku is still alive, though he remains unconscious. Zone escalates to a kaiju battle where the Rangers continue to have a hard time, even when piloting Super 5 Robo. The monster even damages it, removing the right hand of the robot after a failed finisher, and even throws them underwater, where they begin to slowly run out of oxygen. Super 5 Robo is in shambles, but not once do they bring up the magma base, even if it means Gaku's going to die. But he becomes conscious for a brief moment, only being able to muster the words,
I'm addicted.
This inspires Ken to show off the power of the 5-tector, ejecting himself from the robot and swimming up to the surface from the bottom of the ocean. He then runs all the way to the magma base, grabbing the Battle Tector armor from Arthur and running all the way back. If this was any other character, I would refuse to believe this is real, but because it's Ken, I'll give it a pass. He inserts himself into a gun barrel where the left hand of Super 5 Robo previously was, and asks Fumiya to launch him, like his literal body, like just him, at the robot in another potentially sacrificial final blow, similar to what Gaku did earlier in the episode. It's awesome, and is some shit that could only happen in Toku. Ken flies across the sky and is thrown into the monster of the week. Gaku wakes up just in time to have a panic attack over this, but it's no biggie because Ken is fine, and now the 5-man have access to their new team power-up.
ファイブマンを守り、ファイブマンをパワーアップするスーパープロテクターなのだ。
In this next episode, Zone has created a fake elementary school where they pretend to be the sibling teachers. They actually kind of have this uncanny valley effect because they look so similar to their counterparts. They're doing this to get access to dig underneath the school to find the monster that helped them successfully destroy a handful of planets in the past. Apparently, the alien ship crash landed on Earth a while back and is now stuck underground somehow. All is going to plan until Fumiya finds Billion pretending to be him in the park, prompting him to investigate and almost almost die after being buried alive, but he's able to escape thanks to the 5 Tector. We haven't really talked about it yet, but I do like this power-up. It's pretty much just some shoulder pads, but I like how simple it is. Plus, it has some historical significance, being one of the first ever power-ups in Sentai. The only thing I found predating this is the Battle Tector used by Dyna Black and only Dyna Black in Dynaman, which I don't really know if that counts because I've personally never seen Dynaman, so I don't know if this is like one of those one-off silly things or something. I'm also surprised that if anyone were to get the first ever upgrade in the franchise, it wouldn't be a Red Ranger. Not to mention, the 5 Tector just looks like a fully developed version of whatever the Battle Tector was meant to be. They're obviously able to foil Zone's plans with relative ease thanks to all of them using the power-up at once, but more importantly, I need to mention this gnarly-ass dogfight between Red and some spaceships in this episode because it goes stupid. And while this episode isn't super deep, especially compared to the last few we've just gone over, I still like this one and how it ends with the 5-man becoming teachers again, taking the place of all the villains at this school. And this next episode is actually a Billion focus episode, which I feel weird about. Not because I don't think villains should get focus episodes, quite the opposite, actually. I just genuinely don't know if I like this episode or not. The twins are out practicing when Billion arrives. Remi makes an effort to deck him in the face, which could be fatal considering how it's Remi, but she's stopped by this alien girl that comes from out of nowhere. She claims that Billion saved her life back in the day when Zone was destroying her planet, and she's been looking to repay him ever since. Billion lies to her, saying that he's currently protecting this planet from the 5-man, so she promises to help take them down. She has these pills that turn her into a monster and help her fight, but after taking a few of them earlier in the episode, she only has one left, and if she takes it, she dies, because what other alternative would there be? So she asks Billion if he could take her out on a date before she sacrifices herself. So the two disguise themselves as a very attractive and fashionably dressed 90s couple, and I can't tell if this next sequence happens over the course of like a single day or like several weeks, because she claims to just want one final outing, but they do a ton of shit and change their clothes like 5 times. It ends up with her taking the pill and dying when Billion admits that he never loved her. It's weird because it's all framed like this really romantic love story, with Billion even leaving a rose for her at the end of the episode, but it has like no real impact on his character. I do like what this episode attempts to do, not only with the love story, but with this early 90s Japanese aesthetic with city pop playing in the background. Like visually and cinematically, it's a beautiful episode. I just wish it mattered more, especially considering how we're only 10 episodes away from the finale of the show. And weirdly enough, this next one is also a Billion focus episode. Not really, though. Gaku is teaching kendo to some local youths, because I guess he just happens to be an expert in that all of a sudden, even though it's literally never come up until just now. But it is in the intro, so I guess that makes it an integral part of his character. That's probably enough for most 5-year-olds, to be honest. One of the kids really admires Gaku after witnessing him beat up a group of teens, mugging him and his parents, and Billion has this sword that increases the skill and animosity of the wielder. This child decides to steal it from him, causing him to become a threat to Gaku and the 5-man. They're unable to get through to the kid as he's now being mind-controlled by the blade, but after Gaku nearly sacrifices himself, grabbing it in hopes to finally reach the kid after one big emotional speech about heart and stuff. And it works. Billion reclaims the sword, and it transforms him into Saber Billion, where he challenges 5 Red to an epic duel. And it's an amazing fight that eventually ends with Billion losing the sword and promising to do whatever it takes to destroy Gaku and the 5-man. Once again, this is another episode that focuses more on some child instead of our main cast, which unfortunately is going to be a thing for the next few episodes. But I think that's fair, because it doesn't necessarily mean the episodes are bad. Plus, it's also coming off of a streak of what I would consider to be some of the best episodes in Sentai history. It's cool if we chill out for a bit. The next random person of the week is another cutie patootie for Kazumi to fall in love with. He's actually a chameleon monster that's meant to distract Kazumi from her responsibilities with the Fiveman. It kind of feels like a rehash of the episode where Fumiya falls in love with Doldora, or even that other time Kazumi fell in love with a random love interest for a week. But I do like how it ends with the siblings realizing how much pressure they put on Kazumi to take care of all of them. Since she's the oldest daughter like Gaku, she's kind of taken on this maternal role, doing housework and other motherly things that distract her from being an average girl, since she doesn't normally go out or go on dates and have any fun. I was actually kind of out of line saying that this focused more on some random fool. This is probably Kazumi's best focus episode. Remi is teaching a karate class. One of the students, the kid of the week, is obsessed with Five Yellow and wants to be just like her. Ironically, she doesn't know that her teacher actually is Five Yellow. Fun fact, the child actress goes on to portray another Sentai character in Tokusatsu Sentai Deca Ranger. Can you guess which one? I'll give you 5 seconds. Did you guess Piglet? You know Piglet. Chevalier has a plan this week to take the Fiveman's powers away from them and give them to the Gingaman, which is actually a super interesting concept, all things considered. The child is, of course, disappointed to see that Five Yellow is not a quote-unquote ally of justice upon meeting her, while encountering Ginga Yellow using the Fiveman powers. It's always weird seeing Sentai characters hold real-ass guns, but more importantly, I have to ask, is this our first male Pink? I have no way of confirming the gender of Ginga Pink, but the wiki uses he/him pronouns, so I guess that means Kinjiro's been given stolen valor. Remi runs over all of them with her car, Carter Grayson style, and overall this is just another great episode for Remi's actress to show off, and I really can't complain because she genuinely is such a great martial artist. The only other point of note here is, while sweeping the Volgire, Garawa accidentally finds a new room he's never seen before when he was captain, which sets up the final arc of the show. But I think we have one more episode before we could really get into what that means. In episode 43, our child of the week is obsessed with television, watching old episodes of Super Sentai, including Denji Man and Battle Fever J to be specific. To address this, his mother asks Fumiya, a 20-year-old, to hang out with him and play outside. I would say that the 90s were a different time, but I fear this is how most Nickelodeon stars developed trauma. His television eventually turns into a monster, along with a few others across Japan, and starts to play anti-Fiveman propaganda, essentially in an attempt to red pill a bunch of Japanese men into despising truth and justice. They're groypers. Zone could have just played a bunch of Nick Fuentes clips, and it would have done the exact same thing. Fun fact, I had to rewrite that joke. Can you guess why? Arthur would be proud though. And yeah, the Fiveman freaking win, and Fumiya sucks ass at baseball. It's a great time. The secret room in the Volgire is discovered by the rest of the admins, but there's no real other developments in this episode about that. Since we now have 5 episodes left in Fiveman, we're now officially about to enter what I consider to be the show's endgame, which makes this an appropriate time for an intermission. I have nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, Lambo Calrissian.
Hey folks, this interlude is brought to you by me, Lambo Calrissian, and I'm here to speak to you about the gospel of how Chikyu Sentai Fiveman is fantastic. So if I start saying stuff Christian's already said in this long ass video, then consider this part a cosign. I was recommended Fiveman by my Legion brothers, Ginga Urban Sentai 5, in the spring of this year, and by the time I got to the 6th episode, I was already in love. The premise itself is very compelling, and it feels like something that I would read in a modern manga today. Like, for real, this is low-key a whole team of characters in Kagurabachi or some shit. Listen to me, if a dude jumped on the elevator and gave you the pitch that a group of siblings whose parents got slimed out by evil gentrifying aliens make it their goal to not only defeat said aliens when they show up to Earth, but they also follow in their parents' footsteps by being teachers, that concept should just be raw in and of itself when it's pitched to you. How are you not on board already? Okay, maybe you're confused with the symbols on their helmets and you keep asking yourself, what the fuck is a Earth Sentai? Well, I got you. If you watch more modern Sentai, then you know that there's a strong emphasis on motifs and how the rangers and tools of those series fit within it. Kyuger has a train motif, Kyoryuger has a dinosaur motif, etc, etc. However, I don't really see or feel one when I look at Fiveman, and that's because I believe that the Chikyu or the Earth isn't their motif, it's more of what they represent. Earth to them is a planet of hope, wonder, and growth, where the humans have endless potential and it's shown at its peak when they work together. Together, they are able to soar new heights, ascend to the stars, and even give other life that same hope and wonder. You don't believe me? Here's a bunch of examples. The time the power of Earth brought them back from the verge of death, teaching a kaiju math, every time they get the dog dookie piss beat out of them for their students, their robot Uncle Arthur, who suspiciously sounds like Boondario, becoming a fucking cannon to protect them, and my favorite episode of the entire series, episode 37, in which the 5-Tector power-up represents the siblings' love and trust for one another.
He ain't lying.
But in my opinion, the most important ones are the interactions with the aliens affected by the Imperial Army Zone. Saya, Gunther, and especially Sora are examples of the Fiveman realizing the importance of defeating the evil gentrifying aliens, and they lock in even harder to do so. This makes the episodes where they give niggas like Gaura and Billion the work plus overtime feel cathartic for not only the Fiveman, but for us, the audience, as well. I could say much more about this section, but I'll just leave it here, and the last thing I think I'll mention is why I think the Fiveman being teachers is a very raw-ass idea. Because I wasn't A, born when this show aired, and B, I'm not Japanese, I have no idea the true cultural impact this show had on the Japanese lives at the time. But I like to believe that a lot of kids saw their teachers and positive role models a lot differently after watching this show. It may not have happened a lot, but all the male science teachers in Japan that probably wore red jackets got looked a lot differently that day, that's all I'm saying. And to me, that's just a really positive thing to think about. I can't prove anything I just said, but again, the good vibes I get from thinking about that headcanon is just, it just helps sings the praises of Fiveman. But yeah, man, that's all I got. I'm pretty sure Christian has my links in the descriptions below somewhere. So if this cosign isn't good enough for you, I don't know what is. Fiveman's just that great. Also, give Christian $5.
Thank you so much to Lambo for doing this for us. I'm a really big fan of his, and I like to consider him a personal friend of mine. I sent him a Christmas card last year, so I think we're good. And of course, his channel will be linked in the description, and thank you for watching this video. We're pretty deep into it, so I hope that means you're enjoying yourself. Feel free to like it, if so, or even subscribe if you feel like I've earned it at this point. If you are still feeling non-committal, check out a few more videos and hopefully I'll earn it. One more thing, just like in the Dragonite video, I want to give you guys the opportunity to vote for what you would like to see us make another long video about next. If timed correctly, there should be a poll on the community tab right now, as well as on Twitter for you to vote for the following options. I just ask that you listen to my pitches for each of them before making a decision. First up, we have Jaka. Judging by the results of this last poll, it seems like a lot of you guys are interested in me talking about more older Sentai series, and I am totally okay with over-explaining Sentai being my History of the Power Rangers or Legacy of Kamen Rider. I would actually be ecstatic to be known as the Retro Sentai guy. That being said, I don't want you guys to get sick of it, but the option's there, and I feel like Jaka is the next season I'm most interested in watching, given how short it is, making it easier to pump out at a reasonable time, but also with Big One's introduction and how that was all handled. Next up, we have Kamen Rider Black. I just gave you a Retro Sentai, so here's a Retro Kamen Rider. When it comes to Showa era Rider, this is probably the one I'm most interested in watching. Plus, this could lead to a trilogy of us watching Black RX and even Black Sun after this. Who knows? This next option is one I was super passionate about in the beginning of the year, and then slowly became less and less interested as time has gone on. That's Power Rangers SPD. Kind of like a follow-up to the Dino Thunder video, except less focused on like nostalgia and like re-experiencing my first Power Rangers show. This one would be more focused on how like Power Rangers SPD canonically takes place in the year 2025, and now we are currently in the year 2025, and sort of comparing how similar or how accurate, I guess, the show is when it comes to just how many things it predicted accurately. On the one hand, I know Connor and Estee have made SPD videos, and I have a weird feeling that there's probably going to be a lot more people making SPD videos given it being 20 years after and that whole pitch that I just explained. But on the other hand, it kind of feels like a now or never situation. Like, if I don't talk about Power Rangers SPD now, I don't know if I ever will in the future. So it's up to you guys. And this next option is another one that's kind of out there. Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. I have a feeling no one will vote for this, just like the Ninja Turtles. But I don't know. I just kind of wanted to throw another Ameritoku in there just for the sake of it. Totally okay if you guys don't pick that one. I was thinking of American Toku, and since I don't want to put TMNT Next Mutation on the list twice, figured I'd just throw up Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad. But yeah, feel free to vote on Twitter or the community tab. Like I said, I just really want to thank you guys for how much support you've given me, especially with the Dragon Knight video, as well as a lot of these other more, I don't want to call them highly produced, because it's kind of the same stuff I would do anyways, just with a bit more focus and attention to detail, I guess. I guess that makes it more highly produced. I don't know. I really appreciate it, and you know, I'm super thankful for where the channel is at. Even if we're not the biggest Toku channel in the world, I've really have been on a personal journey of realizing that numbers mean nothing to me. So at this point, I'm just really glad that I can make things that I'm passionate about, and people seem to like that even more than the stuff I was putting out before. And that's really awesome, because there's a lot of Toku channels that feel very pressured to put out weekly content, and I did feel really pressured to put out weekly videos for a while. And now I don't have to. I feel free from that. And in fact, I feel encouraged to not do that. And just thank you guys for being cool about it. And yeah, I think that's enough of me being corny. So back to Fiveman. With that, we are officially 5 episodes away from the end of Fiveman. This, in my opinion, is where the series really starts to pick up steam and enter its endgame. It's officially been 1 year since Newtown Elementary has been destroyed, and when Zone has officially began their attack on Earth. The children are preparing for the first day of school by setting out Gaku's favorite flowers. We cut to him and the other siblings getting ready to return to their jobs at the school, as they're excited to see their kids and attend a ceremony to celebrate the reconstruction. Right as they're leaving for work, Arthur notes the wildly fluctuating readings coming from the geomagnetism monitor. It turns out Garawa has discovered these dookie logs. I don't know, man. The show never explains what it's supposed to be. Alright. They radiate an immense amount of energy that Garawa has harvested and implemented into Golin 36, making it substantially more powerful than previous Golins. As the Rangers are driving to work, they notice a bulldozer begin to plow towards them at full speed. 36 makes himself aware to the Fiveman and turns the construction equipment into his own mecha within seconds, calling it Garawan, which of course is piloted by Garawa. They quickly summon 5 Robo and attempt to defeat the mecha while the kids are wondering where they are. But right now they're stuck in a mech fight, and of course there's no way they're going to destroy the main mecha with only 5 episodes left in the entire series. Holy shit, they blew up Super 5 Robo! Garawa celebrates his victory of finally defeating the Fiveman, claiming his proper place as captain of the Volgire. Chevalier contests this, observing that the Fiveman exited the ship, meaning that Garawa has not yet won without their corpses. This prompts Garawa to target the magma base next, to fully assure the Fiveman have no way of coming back from this. Clearly, Garawa forgot about Max Magma, but it's okay because so did the Fiveman. Arthur, once again proving why he's the most useful robot companion, launches the base into space before Garawa can attack it. Coincidentally, Garawa intercepts a fax machine from students attempting to get in contact with the sibling teachers. You know, the thing that they only ever did once in the series before this. They decide to do it again at the worst possible time, as this gives Garawa the idea to attack the school next, knowing the Fiveman won't be able to hide if he attacks children. Arthur and the 5 catch wind of this and attempt to stop stop the robot from destroying the newly remodeled school, with the idea to blast the robot's cockpit using the Arthur cannon. But the deconstruction of 5 Robo is enough to put Garawa back in good standing with Meadow, meaning that he is now in competition with Chevalier for the captaincy. In the next episode, the 5-man are attempting to repair the robot when Fumiya falls asleep, causing him to accidentally electrocute himself. Kazumi pleads with Gaku to let them rest as they've been working for over 24 hours on the mecha, out of fear for when Zone will strike again. Gaku asks them to hang on for a bit longer, as Super 5 Robo is the only answer to Zone's oncoming advances. Fumiya begins to question if repairing the mecha is even possible at this point. Meadow is smart enough to take the opportunity to attack the 5-man now that they no longer have their robot, calling this her final push. Garawa has a plan in motion, but it appears that Chevalier and the Gingaman have occupied the room containing Garawa's collection of stool samples. They're using it to summon a goddamn meteor that just so happens to also be a super galactic warrior. They challenge the teachers to a fight and introduce them to the Rock Men, born from rocks. That's a direct quote, and technically the second villain Sentai team in this series. That is somehow less interesting than the first. The monster is able to give the rocks life, and adversely is able to turn life into stone. Starting with Kazumi, they turn each of the 5-man into rocks. And just as there's no hope left and Gaku is about to be turned into stone, another space rock falls from out of nowhere. Inside it, Gunther. Remember him from the Star Carrier episodes? I'm serious, if they gave this fool an actual suit, y'all would never shut up about him. Zone ends up taking Gaku to Meadow in order for her to witness the defeat of the 5-man in person, but Gunther follows them into the Volgyre as he still has pertinent information to tell Gaku about his parents, which is exactly where he left off before he was turned into stone in episode 20. Sadly, Gaku is turned into a boulder and it's left to Gunther to save the world. But when he ends up getting cornered by Zone, he decides to kick the boulder into another sectioned off room of the Volgyre, knocking it into some dangly things, releasing an acid that disintegrates the stone casing surrounding Gaku's body. Upon coming back to life, Gaku notes how it appears as though he is inside the body of a giant creature. At this moment, the walls around the Volgyre begin to collapse, revealing to Gaku and the Zone admins that this is in fact not a spaceship, but rather a giant alien creature, meaning that Meadow has been deceiving them this entire time. She reveals that the Volgyre is in fact the one absorbing the energy of these destroyed planets, and the Zone team seemed to feel really betrayed by this, since I guess they were under the impression that Meadow was the one doing the absorbing, even though it's revealed in the next episode that Meadow was just a projection created by the Volgyre ship to make it more easy for her to like persuade people into following it, which in my opinion feels like she never actually lied to them, because she kind of just is the Volgyre. Like Meadow is the Volgyre, even if the Volgyre created her as like a projection of itself, like she still is the Volgyre. But like I don't know. Regardless, they're really distraught over this, and I have no clue why that's the case. Because what does it change if she's a giant face or like a spaceship? She wasn't gonna let them hit either way. How even would she do that? In the next episode, the Volgyre flies over the Newtown Elementary School and crash lands once Meadow notices the Shidon flowers planted for Gaku out front. Meadow fades from existence as the Volgyre takes over, explaining how she is no longer needed to manipulate the Zone admins. This causes Doldora to crash out, and the Volgyre decides to put her out of her misery when Zaza attempts to help her. They're combined and become a new fusion monster with the task of destroying the Shidon flowers. When Gaku goes after her, he is stopped by Billion, claiming he has a score to settle after the duel from episode 40. Thankfully, the other 5-man arrive to defend the Shidon flowers along with the children from the school, but she proves to be too powerful, and she's successful in turning most of the flowers blood red. With only one remaining, a child decides to grab the flower and run off as the monster chases after him. As this is happening, Gaku is able to escape the Volgyre thanks to Gunther intervening in his duel with Billion, allowing him to stop the monster from hurting the child. When she wraps him in her vines, Billion uses the opportunity to end Gaku, but Gunther jumps in right before he's able to get to him, causing Gunther to be impaled by Billion's sword. He refuses to die before telling Gaku what actually happened to his parents. After disarming Billion and cutting Gaku free, he tells him to look for the planet P16 of the Milky Way galaxy, as this is where his parents are. Gunther proceeds to recount how their parents saved him after he suffered an injury. Admiring the Star Carrier from the window of his patient room, he steals the robot, leaving them stranded on the planet with no way of ever returning to their children. With his dying breath, he apologizes to the Hoshikawa siblings and peacefully moves on. Billion returns, promising this to be his final battle with Gaku. Conversely, Gaku promises that the Fiveman are willing to protect every living thing on this planet, even a single flower. As Billion and Gaku continue their duel, the siblings take on the Doldora Zone fusion monster, and the children are there to witness their teachers are in fact the Fiveman. In this intense match, Billion breaks a bottle of sake and removes his cloak. Gaku summons the Five Tector and launches for a final strike, splitting Billion's sword in half and ending their rivalry for good. During his final moments, Billion admires the moon and declares, Alright. A Golin grows Doldora into a giant monster, and thankfully, Arthur was able to repair Star 5 while the Rangers were fighting. Afterwards, they lay the flowers at the resting place of Gunther and promise to defend Earth in his honor. And once they're done with that, they will look for their parents. As the sun sets, two students gift Gaku a Shidon flower, ending the episode. With the information that their parents are on P16, the siblings begin to broadcast a variety of signals from the magma base in hopes to get in contact with them in this next episode, desperately shouting into the vacuum of space in hopes for a response, when suddenly, their mother begins to call out their names from one of the speakers, but only for a brief moment, as the Volgeyer is now emitting an aura jamming the signals and blocking the Fiveman from responding. Fumiya was excited to finally talk to his parents for the first time, and Remi admires the family portrait, reminiscing as to how it felt to finally hear her mother say her name. The Volgeyer is beginning to transform into a super beast now that it has gained enough energy. Garawa, Chevalier, and the Gingaman arrive to take care of the Fiveman as their parents on P16 continue to try contacting them, as they rightfully fear that their children must be battling Zone. In a fight that lasts nearly the entire episode, Gaku slices off a portion of Garawa's helmet, and the Fiveman line up, each opposing their respective Gingaman counterpart, and in one shot, end them with a single blow. And no one cares. Shortly after, the Black Golin arrives to threaten the Fiveman, and I don't know what practical effects they used here, but I really want y'all to admire this shot of the Black Golin lifting up this boulder. This is something that would be CGI today, and I feel we need to respect the effort that went into this sequence, even for just a 10-second shot. Gaku summons 5 Robo, but Chevalier interrupts him, just as the robot enters the battlefield. Gaku gives his siblings the okay to proceed without him, while he and Chevalier fight in a chain deathmatch, a traditional duel on Chevalier's planet where two warriors are tied together with a chain that can never be broken until one of them dies. We cut between the two fights, and Arthur eventually arrives for backup in the Star Carrier. I don't even need to say it at this point. You know how I feel about Arthur, bro. With moments before the Volgeyer completes its evolution, Dongoros begins a countdown that ends with the Black Golin being destroyed and Chevalier collapsing at the hands of 5 Red, which ironically helps the Volgeyer complete its molting. Chevalier's soul is stained with the blood of countless lives he's slaughtered in the galaxy, making his sacrifice the greatest final push, allowing Volgeyer to transform into its true form. Garawa begins to celebrate the death of his adversary, and their parents continue to attempt establishing contact with them, having a pertinent message that could greatly help their battle against the Volgeyer. In the final episode, Garawa is going senile after finally besting Chevalier, cheering on the Volgeyer as it wreaks havoc on the planet, knocking over Super 5 Robo with relative ease. Arthur calls out to the team from the magma base, but no one answers. The city is in panic. While evacuating, the child from earlier grabs the Shidon flower as he promised Gaku that he would raise it with care. The Fiveman begin to wake up and notice the Volgeyer preparing to engulf the magma base. And holy shit, this thing's huge! And wait just a moment, they finally transform into Max Cross once again. Been like 18 episodes. Regardless, Max Magma is still not enough to handle the Volgeyer. Their parents are pleading to hear a response from their children. Just as the base is being destroyed, Gaku is knocked into a receiver, allowing their voices to come through. The siblings crowd around the computer as Gaku speaks into the microphone, and I would be remiss to not note this moment from Fumiya. Throughout the entire show, he has been begging for the opportunity to speak with his mother for the first time. And in this moment, he finally gets the chance to do that. And we get to see her reaction to hearing the baby she was forced to abandon 20 years ago. It is a huge moment, and it only lasts 5 seconds, but I absolutely love it. Gaku tells them that they're currently facing the Volgyre, and their parents begin to cut out, but through the static, they hear their father mention the Shidon flower, prompting the Fiveman to find the children with the last remaining flower on Earth. With it in their possession and the magma base in shambles, they fly Super 5 Robo into the stomach of the Volgyre to find a deranged Garawa, gloating about being the surviving captain of the Volgyre. Gaku cuts his other ear off, and that's enough to keep him busy for another 10 minutes. Inside, they find an alien with the face of Queen Meadow. The power of the Shidon flower allows her to astral project herself and tell her story to the Fiveman. It turns out she was just an ordinary girl, and the Volgyre was so down bad for her, but she rejected him, prompting him to encase her in a glass prison, like any man would. And with the power of the Shidon flower, Volgyre's curse is finally broken, allowing her to decompose peacefully. Garawa, still unable to admit defeat, joins her in her coffin, and the Volgyre begins to explode from the inside. The team flies out with Super 5 Robo and decide to finish off the Volgyre with a final attack now that its defenses are down. Gaku mentions that this could be their final moments as they collide with the beast. Garawa and Dongoros remain inside, causing them to also perish as the ship begins to explode from the impact, finally putting an end to Zone's wrath. But the Fiveman story is not over. After the battle, they're on a beach with a bunch of toddlers, because why would they be anywhere else? While holding the Shidon flower, Gaku tells the kids about the team's plans to follow in their parents' footsteps, to rehabilitate multiple planets across the galaxy and make them just as beautiful as Earth. This disappoints the students, but feeling pride in their teachers, they begin to sing Aogeba To'otoshi, a Japanese graduation song, serenading the Fiveman onto their next stage of life, as they travel the galaxy saving planets in search to reunite with their long-lost parents. And while we never see the Fiveman reunite with their parents, I like the tone this ends on, as the story continues with the team now facing new feats to accomplish. And while this means that the Fiveman's journey continues, the same cannot be said for Hirohisa Soda, as this is the last Sentai episode he was ever the main writer for, ending his saga that began all the way back with Goggle 5 nearly a decade earlier. As for the actors, Kei Shindachiya, who played Ken, appears in episode 19 of O-Ranger as the pilot for Red Puncher, which just so happens to be another episode written by Soda, though he's not the main writer. Gaku's actor Toshiya Fuji portrayed one of the many disguises for Shurikenger in episode 28 of Hurrikenger, and most notably, Remi's actress not only returned in Gokaiger, but in Kaku Ranger as the Pink Flower Kunoichi member, which I've said before on the channel is one of my favorite Sentai series, and I'm shocked to find this out because it retroactively makes me love Kaku Ranger that much more, because of course you would bring back Ryo Narashima for a role like that. And who could forget Piglet? You know him. So I guess the question is, did Soda save his legacy this season? Arguably, he never had to. He will be a legend regardless of how this series ended up. But he also went on to write a number of Sentai episodes after this, while never necessarily being the main writer. I think that just also proves how he still is a very talented individual, regardless of the quality of Fiveman. And I think I did a pretty good job of illustrating how dramatically the show's quality increased after episode 26. I think more than anything, Fiveman shows us that no matter how small of a chance there is to succeed, it is still worth trying. As long as there's a chance to find treasure, save a friend, fall in love, or prove your worth, a chance to become the world's best fighter, or save the environment, teach someone to enjoy the mundane, or a chance to tell an amazing story, or reclaim what is rightfully yours, to bring back your dead brother, or a chance to revive a planet that was thought to be extinct, or even to find your missing parents. Regardless of if everyone hates you, your physical body is at risk, you don't know who to turn to, and everything feels topsy-turvy, risking your life can open the path to survival, even if it's just to save a single flower. And for Soda, there was still a chance to save a dying kids show, so it was still worth trying. Thank you so much to my patrons, Andrew B, Rat Toku, Sergeant Hooked on Heroes, Daniel A, Soundboard, Caleb H, RJF, Progrise16, Omni Ranger, Ninja Drayan, Arnesto, and Soren S. If you want more over explaining Super Sentai, click the video on your screen.